Hello, social gooders. Hello, Filippo Grandi.
Hi.
Filippo is an old friend and a fellow traveler. And just for this day, we're going to let you listen in on our conversation. And what kind of a conversation is this? It's a conversation between two migrants. I'm from Canada. Filippo is from?
Italy.
Italy. And what does being a migrant mean? It meant we have left our countries to follow our dreams, to get the job we always wanted, but we have something special that we kept. And what is that? We can always go home. And that is something that is denied to some 65 million and counting people around the world. They are refugees. So come and join us. Filippo and I are going to sit here. We're going to have a discussion about refugees. Now, Filippo, you have a very interesting Twitter handle. I always think about it when it says, @refugeeschief, which means what? You've got a very big tribe.
I'm a little bit uncomfortable with that handle. I don't know if I'm really the chief of the refugees, 65 million. I think what I am is I'm the head of an organization that has global and precise responsibilities for people who cannot go back home.
Well, let's start our conversation the way everyone's conversations should begin. For the last year, you've been going everywhere from Hungary to Honduras, from Sweden to South Sudan. How are you?
Little bit jet lagged, but I'm okay. You know, I became High Commissioner, that's my actual title, High Commissioner for Refugees, about a year and a half ago, at the beginning of last year. I visited 54 countries. Why? Well, one, because I think it's important for me to be present where we do have refugee crisis. And remember, 90% of the refugees and displaced are not in the rich world. They are in poor countries, middle-income countries in Africa, in Asia, in the Middle East, in Latin America. So lots of traveling there. And then remember also, my organization, big UN organization, does not have automatic funding. We have to earn every single penny that we receive. Governments fund us on a voluntary basis. So I have to go and raise funds in capitals of countries that have the means to support and share this responsibility.
If we're going to talk about refugees, and we don't have a lot of time, we have to get to the point. And one of the points I think we should get to is what is behind us. What is that? Hashtag 2030 Now, which is about the Sustainable Development Goals. We're going to talk about number 4. This is a test. What is number 4? Come on, guys. You're the next generation. Smarter, the best, the brightest. Education. Great. Okay. Let's find out. You just heard a little bit about Filippo. Let's hear a little about you. How many people graduated from high school? Put up your hand. Wow. You are so lucky. If you are a refugee, 29% of refugees graduate from high school. And if you happen to be a refugee in a poor country, 9%. How many of you went to university? Wow. You're a refugee? These 3 people in front would have a higher education. 1%. Filippo Grandi, what are you going to do to educate the world's refugees?
This is a big problem. You know, in the past, education was not considered a priority. There was always a hope that a refugee situation would be short, people would go back or find another solution. Now, we always say that the average duration of a refugee situation, the average time that a person spends as a refugee these days, it's a bit of an estimate, it's between 15 and 20 years. That's it. a long, long time. And if you don't have education during that time, you don't have education in life. So we need to address that point. And we need to make specific investments. So it's not only blankets and food and medicines that are important, but also education. You've probably heard this story before, but how many times in my, by now, long career working with refugees, have I heard families tell me, when I ask them, what do you need? They don't say food or money or a house. They say, first and foremost, I want education for my children. So we need to really refocus. Only 6% of our budget is spent on education. We need to mobilize larger resources to invest in this area, and we are doing it. We reduced the number of Syrian refugee children, for example, that are out of school from more than 50% to about 35%. It's still a lot, but it's an improvement.
Yes, and the world promised to all Syrian refugee children that by the start of this school year, everyone would be in class. So the promise hasn't been fully kept. And I want to keep on this idea of promises, because this week, you're going to be hearing from a lot of world leaders, including, of course, the president of this country, President Trump. What do you want to hear from them when it comes to refugees?
I want to hear from them that they stick to the commitments that they made last year. You may remember, I came here to talk about that. Last year, in the General Assembly of the UN, we had a big summit on refugees and migrants. And the next day, a number of countries, led by the US, had another summit in which they made concrete commitments. So I want to hear that they're still committed to those important engagements, especially in some areas like education and jobs, not the traditional humanitarian areas, but the longer-term areas that are appropriate for these long-term refugee situations. Some leaders in Ethiopia, for example, or in Uganda, or in other countries are sticking to their commitments, are doing great work. Not all. So we need to get them all on board, because next year, we will have another big discussion, and we will try to get everybody around what we call a compact. That will be a turning point, but it has to be matched by concrete results.
Tell us something that we don't read in the newspapers or see on television. This is a highly educated, very engaged audience. Come on, tell us something behind the scenes. What do you say when you meet those leaders who last year promised you something, and you meet them again? Hello, how are you? Great to see you. And you're thinking you broke your promise. What do you say to them in private? Come on, tell us, Filippo.
Well, you see,
off the record.
You see, there's a lot of talk about how useless UN summits are, right? Many times it's true. But there is one good thing about public commitments. You can hold people accountable. You can mention it in front of them because they said it. It's not something that I'm asking them to do. They said it, they committed. They still may be reluctant to implement, but it's a little bit easier. It makes it a little bit easier for people like me or the president of the Red Cross that was here before, other humanitarian leaders to try and encourage them and nudge them in that direction. It's tough work, but at least we have something to refer to when we have those nice encounters with them.
Okay, so summits are supposed to result in people doing something. All you out there, you're at the Social Good Summit, you're social gooders. What can they do? What can they do when it comes to refugees?
Perhaps the basic message here is remember that refugees are not just numbers. We hear so much about the 65 million and 20 million and 100 million. Refugees are individuals. And one great thing that anybody can do in any part of the world, I'm always telling them, is go out there and get to know the refugees that are in your community. Do some work with the many, many great organizations at the community level that help refugees with education, with jobs, and in other ways. That's important because then you will understand better the plight of people that flee from everything and abandon everything, and you will be able, and that's the other important message, to influence your respective governments in doing the right thing for those people.
Thank you, Filippo Grandi, and thank you to all of you.
Thank you.